Welcome to The Element of Play, the podcast for people who are tired of being told to be more productive, more disciplined, more serious, and somehow still exhausted. With your host, Jodi Salmond, marine scientist, author, speaker, and firm believer that play might just be the missing piece when it comes to leadership, connection, creativity, and coming back to life. Let's get into it.
Ernest teaches financial literacy and leadership to teenagers in one of the most academically successful education systems in the world. Today, we're going to find out what happens when you try to build play into a culture that runs on achievement and why he thinks that's not a contradiction. It's actually the whole point. Ernest Tan is an educator, author, and speaker from Singapore who has spent 20 years working with young people. First as a life skills trainer, then as a Ministry of Education teacher, and now as owner and lead educator of Leven Academy, which has run programs in more than 100 schools and institutions. He's also the author of Smart Money, Start Young, and his work focuses on the gap between what young people know and how they behave. Welcome to the show, Ernest.
Thank you, Jodi, for that very nice introduction.
Very, very welcome. And I'm quite excited to see what we talk about today. We've got a couple of ideas, but love all of the little pathways that our conversations seem to take. So welcome. What I do want to do is actually talk about, we're going to jump straight into it. So the podcast is called The Element of Play. And we've been talking a lot about students, teachers, burnout, and recovery. And when I was 7, I think I've mentioned before, but my teacher actually wrote on one of my projects, she gave me an A+++. And I remember that because I was always an overachiever. And I remember that she had also made a note that said, if you continue on this path, you will burn out. Now, I've had that kind of tucked away in the back of my brain for many, many years, didn't think anything of it, was a throwaway comment. And yet, fast forward 20 years or so, and I first saw my signs of burnout. So when I talk about watching capable, high productivity kids go through this kind of thing, and I'm sure you've seen some of it, I've actually lived that as well. And I didn't notice it happening at the time. And it did take a little while to kick in before I actually saw the impacts of my overachieving behavior. So I'm very, very interested in hearing your input. And to really kick it off, I want to start with saying, in this season of your life, what does play mean to you?
So before I jump into answering your question as to what does play mean to me and specifically my business, because it is run purely on play and what we do with the play itself, I must say you might be a closet Singaporean because you've gotten an A+++. How many pluses would a person be able to get? So I think you are an honorary Singaporean, so welcome.
Thanks, sir.
So I guess when it comes to play, I think play is a key feature of how my company does business. And we integrate play in terms of what it is we wish to teach. There's a lot of things that we want to teach our kids. There's a lot of learning objectives. We want them to know teamwork. We want them to know communication. We want them to learn how to work with people. We want them to acquire certain financial ability, financial skills. But yet at the same time, if we were to do the usual thing, someone's at the front, having a nice presentation slide, talking. Within 5 minutes, if the kids have their phones, they will on their phone. If the kids had a paper on their table, they will start doodling around. So play is actually one of the key reasons why my company focuses a fair bit in order to elicit certain behaviors, in order to elicit certain thought patterns. And from there, it starts the teaching.
I think that's actually really important because if you, we've been talking about play for a little bit now, and I do actually think it's fundamental. Obviously, there's the whole podcast is about it, the whole book and coursework is about it. But I think so many people can very quickly kind of discredit it as going, well, play, it's a really soft word. What does it actually mean? Which I guess is why I really like understanding what play means to different people, because it also changes the context, right? So play with students is very different to play with your family versus play in a workplace or with a colleague.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, no matter where you are, play is still trying to do the same thing, right? It's supposed to allow you to be a little bit more of yourself, to lighten the load per se. That idea of, don't take life so seriously. No one ever gets out alive, right? We're so focused on productivity as a culture around the world. Like we put this busyness on a pedestal so quickly. And I think
Hmm.
with kids in particular, like it's one thing for adults to be going through it, we can see it, but to know that it's actually starting at such a young age as well can actually be quite concerning because how do we then well, it is, right? Because if you're putting so much pressure to be perfect as a kid, when is the opportunity to muck
Hmm.
up, right? That's actually really scary. Like,
Yeah.
when can you muck up? When can you fail safely? And it's a beautiful idea that you're already building all of these structures into your business because actually I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And you already touched on some of those key concepts as well. So thank you for bringing those up as well.
No problem. And I think it just touches a little bit into what you have just mentioned because the idea of starting so early and giving so much pressure is I'm not certain if Australia actually has that, but in Singapore it really starts very early. Just on my YouTube ad itself, there are these advertisements of a particular math online software system that encourages parents to begin that particular math software as early as the first year of elementary school. In Singapore, we call it primary school, but I think in Australia, you call it elementary school. So, in order for them to market themselves as, wow, this is the game, this is the system for you to go to, so that your child has a head start. But the thing
Mm,
I ask myself is, are we starting a little too early? Because when we begin the whole race from such a young age, it builds the kind of pressure that you yourself, the A triple plus individual, has gotten, and it causes burnout at a point in your life, which I feel is very early. I think you're 20 plus years old, am I right? You look 20
yeah.
plus.
Yeah. That was, yeah, that's look, there was three pluses there. I don't think you can get more. I think that was her just going, mate, I don't know what else to give you because you keep trying to level up. Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
But also, I think it's really interesting because obviously you want kids to succeed in whatever class they are, right? And if it's a class
yeah.
that kids really resonate with, then awesome. Like, let's help facilitate that. But I think it's also like to be honest, I'm going to tell you what it was. It was a massive volcano and it didn't
Ah,
erupt like any of those, but I had like made all of these pieces. It was massive. It only just fit in the car. It took like three of us to carry it into class kind of thing. But it was marked
wow.
like as a local volcano. Anyway, it was this whole thing. So I just
Mm,
remember, but then also the flip side of that is that now it sets your own precedent because
hmm.
now I know that that's the upper level that I have got so far. So now how do I beat it? So from a self-competitive component, if you're an achiever, is that your glass ceiling now? Right? You've set yourself
Yeah.
a ceiling and now how do you beat it? Or if you don't beat it, are you not as good as you think you are because you're actually dropping from your peak? So there's all of this like psychological component about, you know, making sure that you can do the best that you can. But I think it's really important to, you can fail and it's not the
Hmm.
end of the world. And I think that's really important for us to understand because too many times in life, something that we think is catastrophic in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. Are you alive? Are you well? Do you have your health? Do you have friends or family or a network?
Mm.
Like they're the most important things. Can you take a moment for yourself? Is the world going to end without you? No. Okay. You're actually okay. Reduce that pressure.
Yeah, I
Mm,
agree with it. And I think the idea of play and also knowing that through the play itself you can fail is one of the key ideas that my business actually tries to actually inbuild into it. Because when you play something, there are usually some outcomes, and most of the time you either win, some of the times you either lose. And that itself, while during the whole process of it, when you're playing it, you're having fun, but there's a lot of learning. And recently, I've actually done a financial literacy workshop. My company has created a game. It's called Can You Retire? And I must say, these adults were like really excited. They stood up, they were throwing the dice, they were moving their tokens. When they went into the lottery and they won, they cheered like crazy. When they sold something and they got a big windfall, they cheered. And when they lost, they kind of like patted each other on the back and started to encourage each other. So there's a lot of interactions. The energy was high. But yet, at the end of it, some of them realized that I wasn't able to retire because that's part of the outcome of a game. Some were able
mm,
to retire. So that's what they learned about themselves. And from there, we can then begin the discussion. We can begin the explanation. We can then begin to question and ask, are they doing something similar in their own lives that
mm,
could lead them down that same path that they have experienced in the game? And if they're okay with that, great. But if they're not, maybe they might need to upgrade, upskill, learn something different in order to change the trajectory of their lives. So I think play is very important in not just making it fun. Fun is great,
Yeah.
but play itself reveals yourself. And from that, you can discover and learn what you need to learn and improve on.
Mm. And so this feeds really well into the next kind of component that I had for you. And I wanted to
Yeah.
know, because you just mentioned that you've got a financial literacy course, but also leadership programs for teenagers. And even though the content itself is quite serious, like how does play form in that? And also what drove you towards those kind of components, especially financial literacy? Because I think that that's actually really important and certainly something that I was not exposed to as a kid.
I don't think you're the only person who is not exposed to financial literacy. I went through the entire school system for about 15, 20, like 50, 20 years, I would say. And I have never understood how money worked. And until I
Mm.
began to receive my first paycheck, that's when I realized I had absolutely no idea what am I going to do with that paycheck. And I didn't know that, at least in Singapore, I think the similar idea of it is superannuation.
Yeah.
In Australia, we have something similar called CPF, Central Provident Fund, where we set aside a certain amount of money and it goes into a bank account that we cannot touch at all. It is purely for retirement. I
Yeah.
didn't know all these things. I didn't know about taxes. I didn't know that I had to pay taxes, which was to me like robbery. So when I realized that there's so much I didn't know, I took it upon myself because I knew nothing about it to educate myself. So one of the reasons why I think financial literacy features quite important in my business is because there isn't enough information and the people are genuinely quite hungry for the information that is from the education system. So that is part one. Part two, when it comes to the question of how is play integrated to something as serious as leadership,
Mm.
I think it's a nice marriage because I don't teach leadership from the play itself. I reveal leadership through the play.
Yeah.
So certain aspects of the games are set up so that certain people can rise up, certain people can follow. Sorry about that. Certain people can display communication skills, decision making, and from that, we reveal the things that are lacking, the gap, the areas in which they lack of. And from there, this is what you lack. Here is what are some frameworks that you might want to consider having so that you can improve yourself, you can lead better. And when you lead better, you are able to achieve certain outcomes that you feel would benefit the organization you're in, the school you're in, the teachers who have less workload on them. They can then entrust you to do more. And when they entrust you to do more, you can guide your leadership board, your student body to do things that you do like. And I just and I preface this with amazing thing that happened in Singapore recently. You're aware that the World Cup just ended quite recently, am I correct?
Sorry.
The World Cup, the
Yep, yep,
2026
yep.
World Cup. It just
Yep.
ended, right? So I think
Yep.
there were like four or five schools in Singapore, secondary schools, I think what you call high schools in Australia. The leadership body organized a watch party for the boys in that school to
Yep.
watch and enjoy the World Cup. And mind you, it happened about 3 a.m. in Singapore time.
Yep.
So they essentially had to go into school at about midnight. They were told to rest. They were told to watch. They then rested and they had to carry on school the very next day. And all of this were pushed by the student leadership body because they know the students want it and
Yep.
how they communicated it to the management, the principal, the vice principal. All of that are what we call understanding the needs of your body and then communicating it. So that's a leadership skill. And all these can come out through play.
Yeah, and actually, just leadership skills in general is not something that everybody has. So I think any opportunity that somebody can learn something, because everyone is not a born leader. You can actually learn
Yeah.
how to lead, but not everybody wants to step up, right? And even in this day and age, we know that in the workforce at the moment, like it's really difficult to find those leaders that you can actually go, just go for it. You've got this. Because I feel that also so many people are afraid to fail in life,
Mm,
but definitely in a workplace. And so it's how do you
yeah.
actually make sure that, yeah, that people learn those skills to be really willing to actually take risks, because I think we've become very, very risk adverse for so many
Yeah.
reasons, and we can read into that in another time. But just knowing what, like even the risk process, right? So analyzing risk, understanding
Yeah.
how to mitigate some of those risks and lead groups through it is a really strong skill that I don't think enough people have either. So kudos to you. And I love that there's a group of students that actually, managed to get a group of kids up at 3 a.m. to do that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I was quite amazed when I read the newspaper. I heard the news. I was like, and I literally went, that is going to be something that I will remember for the rest of my life. If I
Yeah.
happen to be a student of that school, it's like I will forget my exams. I will
Yeah.
forget all the mathematical formulas that I've learned. That particular event, core memory.
Yeah, I love that. And I actually just want to come back to your financial literacy component because thinking about that, like
Yeah.
we do have super. I've got a whole story that I can discuss with you at another time about super. And there's some pretty catastrophic things that have happened in Australia lately,
Okay.
and especially to me personally as well. So super is actually something that I definitely have not been paying attention to, or I
Mm,
hadn't been until the last couple of years. It's not something that we're really taught to. But one thing that we are taught
hmm
very early on, literally, someone comes to class and you get like a little, I don't know, you probably get a piggy bank or something, but you get
Oh.
like you put a dollar in. Literally, this is 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You put a dollar in. And every week, someone from the bank comes and you all have these little slips and you put a dollar in. And it's to start you saving. So you understand the concept of saving. And of course, you're like 5 to 10 years old. You don't know the concept of saving. Your parents give you a dollar, you go and put it in this envelope. But the idea is to watch it grow and talk about the
Mm,
interest on it. It might be nothing, right? It might be 10 cents
yeah.
over 10 years. Who knows? But the
Yeah.
concept of starting really early kind of did come in. But to be
Yeah.
honest, I don't really know anything about that besides the fact that every week I had to bring a dollar. So it kind of
Okay.
showcases that, yes, there's an attempt there, but the follow through might not have occurred because there's a really big
Mm,
gap between like really young, putting your dollar
yeah.
in each week, and then actually understanding what it means to how do you buy a house later on? What is your superannuation? How do you retire? So I love that you have created these games in which gamification works, right? We know it does. There's so many
Yes.
behaviors that can be increased through gamification. So I love that not only were the adults really excited about it, but obviously you're having quite success through your company as well.
And I think the learning from the students actually fed into the adults because my core business comes from the students, and I can
Mm.
see that when they are learning while playing, the playing actually showcases their behavior. And I think it's very important for them to fail in a game because the consequences of failing in a game is not consequential at all. But if the consequences of real life really takes place, then you kind of know that it's going to be quite difficult to recover from. So games are a great place for them to utilize their own personal knowledge to play, to understand, to see the
Mm.
consequences. And hopefully when they see the consequences they don't like, they got to change something in their own lives.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good point you just made there is that idea of like, yeah, if you fail in the game, it's okay, right? And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the key components of gamification I hadn't really thought about is that, yeah, you can fail in a game because it's not real life, right? But it is playing with the concepts of real life and playing that out and seeing actually the impacts. And I think that's actually really cool. So well done.
Yeah, and and this comes into the Leven learning cycle that we adopted from this guy called Copes, who came up with this experiential learning model. So
Hmm.
basically, to just cut the long story short, you got to
Go for it.
experience something, you reflect upon your behavior during the activity itself, and you ask yourself, if there's something I can change during that behavior in my real life, what is it? And from there, we see the consequences, and then it's just a cyclical kind of thing.
Yeah, cool. So then this feeds very nicely into if people want to know where they can actually get like find out more about your programs, like what kind of programs do you have? Is it open to people all around the world or is it more just like face to face? What kind of things are happening for you right now?
So right now, I happen to only focus in Singapore. I might consider moving it to across the causeway, which is Johor Bahru, Malaysia,
Hmm.
because my activities, my workshops itself, I really focus a fair bit on activities. They have to see it, they have to feel it, they have to interact with humans, and it's very difficult to have a virtual setting for it. I mean, during the pandemic about 6 years ago, when it took place for the entire world, we were able to run those workshops online, but the learning outcomes of those and the amount of distraction when people are doing this virtual I can't touch you, you can't touch me, seeing but not really focus
Mm.
kind of system is not very helpful. So right now it is purely face to face, and we would have to physically go down to the place. shake your hand, say hi to you, instruct you on what to do for certain activities. And it's not just board games that we do. We use kind of like everyday items. I can use cups, I can use straws, I can use blocks, and giving you certain instructions for what you do. We'll see how you behave. And from what you behave and how you behave, we'll tell you what happens. So
Yeah.
yes, you can find us on www.levenacademy.com. If let's say there's any of your audience who are going to be in Singapore and would like to reach out to me to see how we can collaborate.
Yeah, great. And we'll put all of these in the show notes, of course, anyway, for anyone who is interested in following you. And
Yeah,
you've got a variety of other socials as well that will include. So obviously the website, but people can follow you. You have a podcast, you've got a book, you've got all the things as well, right?
exactly. Yes, yes. I do have a book, I do have a podcast, and I am on your podcast as well. So please subscribe to her podcast right now, The Element of Play by Jodi.
Love that. Thank you for the plug. And most definitely, please make sure to like and subscribe, all the things. Now, one thing that I do on every single episode is we have what's called a play of the week. And my play of this week is actually taken from some of our conversations that we've already had. And that is invest 15 minutes this week in a relationship with anyone in your life. That could be a child, a coworker, part of your family, a colleague. There's no agenda, there's no outcome. It's not a scheduled time necessarily. It's just making time for someone else. Invest that time in growing your relationship and just see what happens. Now,
Yes.
thank you so much for today. What I'm really taking from today's conversation is that people working directly with young people who can already see what's happening, I love that so much. And there are those that are actively building something to close that gap between understanding what's going on and the real life as well, especially in these really high performing activities and groups of people. I love that you're not just diagnosing things, but you're actively trying to find ways to bridge that gap between everybody. And you actually mentioned earlier in a conversation, there was one particular line that's really stuck with me, and that is education is very good at informing kids and far less good at forming them. Information is easy to measure. Forming and teaching a kid to actually own a decision, to recover from a mistake, to stay curious, that's slow. It doesn't show up on a report card, and that's exactly the thing that gets cut short when time runs short. So maybe the real question underneath all of this is not to add more pressure, it's to add more space, like real space for kids to actually find out who they are, actually for adults as well, and allow them to become who they are before the world asks them to decide exactly what that is. So until next time, add a little play into your day and feel a lot more human.
Thanks for listening to The Element of Play. If this sparked something in you, follow the show, share it with someone who needs it, and come find me at elementofplay.com. Stay curious, stay playful, and remember, life was never meant to be beige.